Are we live? I think we are. All right. I believe we're on.
Okay. Here we go.
Yeah, we are. Yes, we are live now.
Okay. So I guess let's begin. And firstly, hi, Adam.
Hey, Rabbi.
Good to see you, and welcome to whomever else may be watching. I suppose it makes sense just to start because it may not be clear, considering that the event is titled "The Rabbi and the Navy SEAL Commander," so people may not know who's who. So I should probably begin by saying that I'm the rabbi, never served as the Navy SEAL, and that title belongs to Adam.
Well,
but I will take a few moments to share a connection. So this past Shabbos was June 6th, which was the anniversary of D-Day, June 6th, 1944. And I actually looked it up on the Hebrew calendar, and the Hebrew day for D-Day was the 15th of Sivan, which would be this past Sunday. So either way, D-Day was just a few days ago. I think in the proper military parlance, that would make today D-Day +3 or something. But a personal connection to that was that my father shared from his mother that on D-Day, she was in the public school in the Bronx, and the principal got on the loudspeaker or sent a message to all the students saying the school was, by order of the president, school was closed, and everyone should go to their houses of prayer, houses of worship, and pray for the soldiers, the brave soldiers who would be landing on the beaches of Normandy. And my grandmother went. She went, and apparently most of the students did not. They figured it was a day off, but she went to a nearby small shul. It was locked. She got the key. She went in, and she prayed. She stood there by herself in the sanctuary, and she prayed. On a lighter note, I guess that makes D-Day maybe davening day as far as my family is concerned. But she says that her prayers, she felt, helped protect her future husband, which was my grandfather, who served in the Navy. He was on the Western Front, but did serve in the Navy and survived the 2 years in the Army and during World War II. So I have, I guess, some U.S. Navy in my blood as well. And so firstly, thank you for your service and for your sacrifice.
Thank you, Rabbi. Yeah, that's definitely a legit D-Day Navy. It's
yes.
The real deal.
So I just want to share first the idea of what we want to do tonight. And that is that knowing Adam, and I know that you can take the floor and share your story and inspire and mesmerize everyone. But we want to do this and connect. The idea tonight is to share where Torah values are mirrored in the values of the Navy SEAL community. So what I'm going to do is share a concept in Judaism. Maybe it's a verse, maybe it's a quote, an idea, and then turn it over to you and give you the floor to share where you saw that concept in your career. So just to take a moment to describe you a little bit, describe Adam a little bit. Adam Weiner spent 14 years in the Navy SEALs, attaining a leadership position, ultimately attaining the rank of lieutenant commander. During that time, also served as a platoon commander, operations officer, led platoons in highly sensitive missions, among others, missions which required undersea launches off nuclear submarines. And until now, I thought it was exciting that I led a Seder in the middle of Russia, but that makes anything I've done look pretty small. But either way, a highly achieved person, as I shared when I promoted this event, based research, about 1% of the Navy serves as Navy SEALs, and probably less than 1% of those reach the rank of commanding officer. So to reach that level is something which is extremely rare. How much more so for it to be a young Jewish man to reach the level of Navy SEAL commander. So I guess my first question to you, Adam, is which was more difficult, serving 14 years as a Navy SEAL or having your children at home over the last 3 months during the coronavirus?
Definitely the former.
Okay.
So I enjoyed having the kids at home over the last few months, quite a bit actually. So that's an easy softball. And then just a quick edit. I was never a commanding officer, so there's ranks and positions. So lieutenant commander, I was the executive officer, but commanding officer, I got out prior to that. So just to be fair.
Okay.
But all that being said, thank you very much, Rabbi. This medium, as you know, is a challenging one. Talking to the screen, you're like me, you're a people person. But that being said, I am excited and appreciate the opportunity to partner with you and study Torah together and learn together. And that's what we're doing today.
Beautiful, beautiful. And really, there's this idea that you should that one should learn from everyone they come across. But there are some people who it's very easy to study from and to learn from. And you're one such person. When thinking about the Navy SEALs, there's so many values that come to mind, all of which are accurate and all of which we can focus on. Just some words which came to mind earlier today as I was thinking: discipline, sacrifice, attention to detail, respect, camaraderie, loyalty. There's so many values we could focus on. But we're going to choose a few, 3. If we have time, maybe we'll get to a 4th. I came across the motto just a few moments ago. The motto of the Navy SEALs was, "The only easy day was yesterday." I thought that was very interesting. But we want to focus on, again, some of the Torah values so that we could both study some Torah messages and hear your remarkable story. So what I want to begin with is one which I think connects us to today. The world we are living in right now is a world that is struggling. Our country is struggling, whether it was obviously first and foremost the coronavirus, which continues to plague so many. Recently, there's been turmoil in our country in connection with justice or social justice. And there's the bottom line is that we are struggling right now. And many would say that it's a dark moment in history. And with that in mind, when I turn to the Torah, there are a few verses and concepts which speak to us during this time. One of them is a quote that comes from the book of Koheles, the book of Ecclesiastes, written by King Solomon, in which he says, and this is chapter 2, verse number 13, he says that I saw that there is Yisron ha'or min ha'choshech, which means there is an addition of light that comes from darkness. And somehow Shlomo HaMelech was telling us that even though we don't pursue challenge, we don't look for darkness, we don't celebrate the darkness, but when we are going through it, or when we have gone through it, we ask ourselves, not only did we survive it, but somehow did we reach a new level of achievement, a new level of light because of it. In Hasidic terminology, there's another simpler term which is used, which is Yerida L'tzorech Aliyah, a descent for the sake of an ascent. That sometimes we have to descend. In fact, the most common, this is used just to describe life itself, that life, the soul has to descend into this world, but it is a descent for the purpose of reaching a level that one could not have reached without that descent. So Adam, I ask you, in your field, in your career, did you experience this concept, the idea that a setback may actually be the opportunity for growth? Take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Rabbi. And it goes without saying, yes, I'm sure everybody out there has experienced a number of setbacks. The challenge is choosing the one to share, right? So I want to talk about something that takes me all the way back as it relates to a major setback when I was a teenager. And I'm a visual learner, so I want to attempt to share out my screen a little bit here. Let's see. Here we go. So a little context for your audience. Like, my parents are New Yorkers. My dad grew up in the Bronx, and my mom grew up in Buffalo. And even though they've lived in Texas for the last 3 decades plus, 4 decades, my dad still has a thick New York Bronx accent. But I like to tell people, you know, it's a Jewish household in Dallas, Texas. I am culturally aware. No pun to our current state of affairs. But to your question, so yes, when I was a teenager, the setback was I had my eyes on the Naval Academy. I really wanted it, and I was not accepted. So right up front, that was a setback. Having said that, for some added context, my brother's 4 years older than me, so he was always a preview of some, major life milestones that would come up at me. Like when he was 13, he was bar mitzvahed, I was 9. I said, wow, gonna have to do that in 4 years. When he left for college, that was a big deal. I got one older brother and one brother, and he's out of the house. I'm like, wow, that's a big decision. So pre-internet, I go to the library. I want to learn about colleges, where I'm going to go, what makes sense, because it's a big deal, right? Big decision. So I stumble across a book on the Naval Academy, thought maybe I was in the wrong section. I was in the military section. Nope, still colleges. And I was intrigued. So I looked into it, I read on it, I learned about it, and thought, wow, yes, this makes sense. Because for me, I was searching. The trigger word is purpose, right? We're all searching for our purpose. We're all unique in our own way in a certain place and time, and that's a lot. Hey, what's my purpose here? I did always have a deep sense of, man, I have it really good. I've got all these climate-controlled environments. I go to soccer games on the weekend. The fridge is always stocked. Life's pretty good. I see things on TV and in the newspapers. These kids, they didn't ask for anything. They didn't do anything to deserve that. And so I always had a sense of service that, I want to pay it back, even if it's in arrears. So yes, I want to go to the Naval Academy. There was an issue. The more I learned about it, that this is a really hard place to get into, right? So kind of Ivy League-esque, if you will. And I was a decent student, A's, B's, some C's, but I had to work really hard to get those. And so my freshman year, realizing this, it's almost like, man, I wish I didn't fall in love with this place, because the odds of getting in are so slim. And it's going to take so much work for something that seems very improbable. And that's a real important part of the story, because I kind of went through the calculus at that point and said, the worst that will happen is that it will help develop me, that I'll have the opportunity to grow, because I'm, as my friend Rabbi Fradkin, Ellie Fradkin in California tells me, Adam, better that you aim high and miss than aim low and hit the target. So I went for it, right? Want to go there. I'm plowing away. And my junior year, you get interviewed by, it's like an admissions board. They call it a blue and gold officer, a representative. They actually come to your house, somebody in the area, so that they can, talk to you, put eyes on you. They write a little report, give it to the admissions board. So I was nervous for it. It went well. So I thought, it did. But he basically said, hey, you're a good kid. You're working hard. Appreciate what you're doing. However, your grades are too low. Your test scores are too low. It didn't matter that you've taken the SAT 4 times. All the scores are too low. And you're just wasting your time. And that hurt. It's not what you wanted to hear at that point. But there was still time. He wasn't the final word. So I pressed on. He was right. Senior year came, didn't get in, as I already mentioned. And while that hurt, there was still a path. So it was kind of like this consolation prize. I could go to boarding school for a year and reapply. And as long as I did okay, there was a good chance I would get in. Meanwhile, not unlike maybe some other Jewish homes out there, my parents were excited to send me to undergraduate, on my way to becoming either a doctor or a lawyer. But it would have been fun, right? I'm a teenager. I'm 18 years old. It'd been great to go off to college with my friends. It would not have been hard, I'll say, to make that decision. But I wanted to keep going to fulfill what I believe to be my purpose. And 5 years later, I did graduate. And so, just to reiterate your point, Rabbi, dissent for the sake of ascent, that was definitely the case. It was worth it for me to take that step back to get to where I was going. I did grow from it. I matured from it. And it absolutely created a benchmark that was so important in my life that I've seen it play out a few times over. Whether it's leaving the Navy after 14 years and starting anew professionally at the Naval Academy itself. I remember making the decision to become a SEAL. I was quiet about it. I was a skinny cross-country runner. I shared with my roommate, wanted him to know why I was getting up early, doing pull-ups and swimming after lunch. And he was like, he almost laughed at me, and rightfully so. I never shot a gun growing up. I think my parents didn't want me to play with fireworks. So he said, come on, Adam, you got to pass your classes. It's totally out of reach. I've been there before, right? A day at a time, it's worth it to go for it. And just recently, professionally, not too long ago, I stepped away from a nice, comfortable corporate salary to start my own business. And that was pretty daunting with a family in tow. So sometimes, yes, we have to take a step back to take a step forward. And the last point I want to make on this, Rabbi, is that in every case, it was a thoughtful decision that was aligned with what I believed to be my purpose at the time. And as it relates to one's purpose, I believe it's something that you have to make it. So, your purpose isn't just going to fall on you. You can't just receive it with open arms, but it does require us to build it. So having said that, I'm going to kick it back over to you, Rabbi, on the whole theory of taking a step back, just take a step forward.
Thank you, Adam. That's really beautiful. It certainly aligns with this concept. I know you mentioned about your parents who are hoping to take the Jewish route of the law school or medical school. I once heard that according to one opinion, the definition of birth, according to Jewish law, is when a child emerges from medical school. That is one opinion. So, but as you told me privately, that your parents ultimately supported what you did and had true nachas from you. And yeah, it's a beautiful way to describe it. That the idea of Yerido Tzarech Aliyah, the light that comes from the darkness, and again bringing it back to where we are right now. And there's no doubt we're in a dark place, as for humanity. And as I've told many, is that if at the end of this all, the only thing we can claim for ourselves is that we survived, if we can make T-shirts which say, I survived 2020 with all the madness, and it just continues to become crazier as each day goes on. If all I can say at the end of this is I survived, then we really did not take advantage of the challenge that God is presenting us. Because Judaism says when you go through a challenging moment, you go through a difficult time, the response is not how do you survive? The response is how do I become better because of it? How is this going to add light in my life? And how can I add light to the lives of others? And not to, God forbid, minimize the darkness of people's lives and the challenges that they're going through. But each person on their own has to challenge themselves the way you challenged yourself. Who was it? I think it was an army member or maybe a general who once said that the success is how high you bounce once you've hit rock bottom. All right. So thank you. That was great. Let's move on to another concept in Judaism, which is really central to Judaism. And I know we've spoken in the past. This is something that you're quite passionate about. So I'm going to share two texts right now. They are not exactly the same. Their messages are not exactly the same, but both, I think, focus on an important element in life. The first is from the book of Jewish Ethics, Pirkei Avos, and that is chapter 2, which is this week's chapter. This coming week, we will be studying. This coming Shabbos, we'll study chapter 2, and the very last Mishnah of chapter 2 is the quote of a great sage whose name is Rabbi Tarfon. You may remember him from the Haggadah. So Rabbi Tarfon said like this, Hu haya omer, this is what he used to say. Lo alecha hamalacha ligmar. It is not upon you to complete the task. V'lo ata ben chayrin lihibatel mimena. But you are not free to desist from that work. So you don't have to complete the task. You may not be able to complete the task. That's really up to God to know whether you may or may not be able to complete the task at hand, but you may not desist from it, despite the fact that you may not be able to complete it. An example given of this is given of Moshe. Moses took the Jewish people out of Egypt. And clearly the malacha, the job then was to bring them into the land of Israel. And that was not only the job, that was his personal dream. And he never was able to see the fulfillment of that dream. And yet, despite that, he knew that he would not see the fulfillment of that dream. He never relinquished his duties as a leader of the Jewish people. And in life, I find sometimes we get caught up with what I am trying to accomplish. And therefore, I focus on the end game that I need to fulfill this, when really, Rabbi Tarfon is telling us, you may or may not be able to, but regardless, you have to focus on the work. And the second text I want to get to is a text from the Talmud, but it's made famous in Chabad circles because the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, made a point of focusing on 12 different quotes or ideas, which he said, it's known as the 12 psukim, which he said every child should be familiar with, 12 different essential ideas in Judaism. And one of them is a quote from the Talmud. And it's Talmud Tractate Megillah, Daf Vavam and Beis, and here it's in the name of a man named Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak says that if someone says to you, Yom Halecha Adam, if a person tells you, Yagati velo matzasi, I have worked hard, but I have not found, I have not achieved. Don't believe that person. And if a person tells you, Lo Yagati, I have not toiled, I have not worked hard, umatzasi, but I have found success, don't believe that person either. If a person says, Yagati umatzasi, I have worked hard and I have found success, that's the person to believe. So again, these are two different quotes. One is from the Pirkei Avos, that the word is not upon you to finish the task, but don't desist from the work. The other is from the Talmud. Rabbi Yitzchak says, only one who says, I have toiled and found success should be believed. Adam, what do you make of this Jewish value, this concept?
Yes, I, again, like many, have struggled a lot. And in that sense, I've had a lot of opportunity for development. So clearly, it's not lost on anybody that any military training, certainly special operations, there's a lot of opportunity to struggle. So just to build a little context around that for our listeners, Rabbi, to become a SEAL, you've got to go through what a lot of people consider to be the toughest military training on the planet. It's called Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL School. It's broken up into 3 phases, about 2 months a phase. So the whole thing's about 6 months. And most of the attrition is front loaded in this program. So my class started with 150 students. And after just 3 weeks, we'd lost a third of our class already. So we've got 100 students and we're headed into the 4th week. And the 4th week is a storied crucible in its own right called Hell Week. And for good reason. So you go straight through, there's no sleeping. It's like 5 days, not like, it is 5 days. And we finished with 36. So we went from 150, 3 weeks later, 100, started Hell Week with 100, finished with 36. Boom. 5 months left to go of training.
Adam, if I may interject for a moment.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you conclude with 36 because there's almost a mystical significance to that number. 36 there's a idea. I'm not sure if it's based in Kabbalah or where the source is, that there are 36 righteous hidden tzaddikim in every generation, 36 hidden righteous people. And maybe that is a reflection of the 36 who concluded this difficult test. Anyways, back to you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. That very well may be the case. So let me take you into it so I can really dive into these concepts of struggle and courage. So like the first night, and some of the activities, so it's like, well, what are they doing with you for 5 days and 5 nights? Just a lot of team building activities. You're organized into what we call boat crews, about 5 to 6 students per boat crew. You run all around Coronado Island with this boat, bebopping up and down on your head, up and down the beach. Do log physical training. So your boat crew, it's like a telephone pole. It weighs like 150 pounds, 200 pounds. And you're just doing calisthenics to the tune of, the instructor behind their megaphone. Another common activity is something we affectionately call surf torture. So everybody gets in the water, you link arms, and you just kind of sit there at the water's edge. You get all wet, and it's cold. Yes, it's the Pacific, but at night it gets cold. Water's cold enough. Stay there long enough. The term is jackhammering, so you're just like shivering uncontrollably. So you get the idea, right? So that first night, we were doing all these things, and then we start doing something called whistle drills, which isn't that hard. Instructor blows a whistle, you low crawl to their boots. Relative to the other things, it's actually much better. The bell represents quitting. So they carry it around everywhere, this ceremonial thing. You can just walk up, ring the bell, and you're done. Right? It's a volunteer program. So your body wants to be warm and cozy, not doing those things. The bell is right there for you. And once one person rang it, it started ringing off the hook. During whistle drills, what gives? And my working theory on this is that it was probably the first time since we got started in Hell Week that people had enough time to start thinking. And their minds go out in front of them. I'm like, no way. I've only been through not even 24 hours, and I'm already feeling this way. I've got however many more nights to go. And we don't like that. That's not how our minds work as humans. Your friend says, hop in the car with me. You don't just hop in the car. You want to know where you're going, right? So it's a very uncomfortable place. It's a struggle. And I knew at that moment when I watched all those people quit, and I thought to myself, man, they're going to use up all the hot water. There won't be anything left when I get there. The minute I could just say that to myself, I'm already in a bad mental state because I'm thinking about being warm and going up there and not being present, not paying attention to the struggle, looking for the out. And so just to break off a little bit and try to tie it tighter to this concept within Judaism of Yisrael, which literally means to struggle with God, how that makes so much, say it makes sense, but it certainly resonates with me that so many experiences that I've had, it's through the struggle that the growth takes place. And I think that's so precious in our Judaism, that we are supposed to grow. And I'll say, unfortunately, to our human wrapper, it requires this struggle. So for me at that moment, I kind of re-engineered my thoughts, and instead of pushing the struggle away, embraced it, just creating these shorter horizons to say, just get through tonight, forget about the rest of the week. It's not up to you to finish the task, but you're not free to desist from it, right? You stay here, that the pursuit is paramount, and that you're not in it because you're some sadist. So you don't look for something that's going to be a struggle, but rather you thoughtfully entered that program for a reason. It's okay that it's a struggle. Instead of you saying to yourself, because it's a struggle, then I walk away. And I do appreciate that it's not natural, that, we're in this human wrapper and our human body is path of least resistance. So you got to battle that back. And just inevitably appreciate that as you seek out whatever it is, your purpose, you're going to marry up against the struggle, and that you have to work hard. I know for me, that's what I did during Hell Week, to just embrace it. It's not like I was smiling about it, but just more mentally accepting of it. Like, yeah, this makes sense. It's supposed to be like this. And another way, at least when I came across that Talmudic quote, which I love, it's not up to you to finish the task, but you're not free to desist from it. I tell people that I hate to lose, but I'm not scared to fail. Kind of meaning the same thing, Rabbi, which is that winning and losing is just a game. But failing is to say, hey, I came short of the goal that we set out to achieve. And there's a humility in saying you don't control all the outcomes, but you control yourself. I don't use my humility of knowing I don't control the outcome to negate any effort in my pursuit to win. Hence the first part of that statement. I hate to lose, but I'm not scared to fail.
Wow. Okay. So I liked there's a lot of what you said over there, which you have to take to heart. The idea also, I know you referenced it, and in private conversation we've spoken more about it, is the idea that you created shorter goals for yourself, try to make it to the next day. And even, the idea instead of trying to conquer everything is to make it through this day's challenge and get to the next day in order to achieve it. And again, this is not, I mentioned several texts, but really in the fundamental or the foundational book of Chabad Hasidic philosophy, that is the message that the author, the Alter Rebbe, shares again and again, is that there are some people who are what we call tzaddikim, and they are going to be perfect, and that is their life goal. But for most of us, we are going to struggle every day. We're going to struggle, and we're going to battle. And like you said, you shouldn't be afraid to fail, because you're going to fail, and then you have to be able to pick yourself up off of the floor and say, I may have failed yesterday. Today's a brand new day. Today's a new opportunity. I'm going to struggle today, and this is my calling. This is what God wants from me, and this is what God, and to some degree, and I know this is maybe slightly different than what you suggested, that God actually loves to see that. God loves to see us struggling and battling. God loves that battle. And once you embrace that, once you embrace the fact that God's not looking for me to be perfect, God's looking for me to struggle with my impulses, with my instincts every day, to climb up again into that rink and put on the gloves to struggle, to battle. It gives you the opportunity to embrace it instead of being depressed by it. Okay, so let's move on to, I think, will be our final concept, which you touched upon briefly. And I want to go to this week's Torah portion. So this week's Torah portion is a Torah portion of Ha'aloscha, which shares many fascinating episodes. But at the very end of the Torah portion, we come across the portion of Torah which perhaps more than any other area of Torah tells us about the nature of the greatest leader of the Jewish people, of Moses. Again, it's called the 5 books of Moses, but Moses certainly doesn't focus on himself, but the Torah here does. And without getting into too great a detail of the context, it is God who actually describes Moshe's qualities. And the first says, chapter 12, verse number 3, Va'ish Moshe anav me'od mikala adam. Moshe was exceedingly humble, more so than any other person on earth. Mikala adam hashapnei adam. Moshe was the most humble person on earth. And 5 verses later, when God describes Moshe's greatness, he says, Moshe is in B'chol Beisi Nemanu. He is trusted in all my home. That's what God says. Pe'el pe'adaber ba. Speak to him face to face, unlike I would speak to any other prophet. So God speaks firstly of the greatness of Moshe, and then the greatness of his connection to God, his leadership, and then simultaneously talks about him as being the humblest of all people. Now, this brings us to a discussion of leadership. And you not only made it, as you described, within the Navy SEAL community, you became a leader of others. And I know that in the Army, there is the rankings, which are very significant. I came across a joke or a line that there are 2 rules in the Army. Rule number 1 is that the commanding officer is always right. And rule number 2 is that if you ever think otherwise, refer back to rule number 1. So we have this, you hear about this in the military, is that there's this recognition that there's the commanding officer, and there's a great deal of respect which has to be accorded. So my question to you, as one who reached a level of leadership in the most difficult field within the Army, is do you see this concept, the leadership which Judaism espouses, that of humility, and that Moshe had, which becomes, by the way, not just Moshe, becomes a point which is emphasized among all the Jewish leaders, is that we search for humility. Moshe, unlike our current system where people run for president or run to be leaders, Moshe ran from leadership. So what would you say in this regard with regards to leadership and humility?
Yes, that I'm very fortunate. Most veterans are, I'd say, that the military leadership is, I mean, the whole culture, it's drenched in leadership. It's preached, I'd say, quite literally on a daily basis. So the element of humility is clearly one of the critical factors that you see in great leaders, and it's spoken of often as a quality that needs to be, worked on to become that good leader. And having said that, there is like this natural juxtaposition, like you were saying, Rabbi, in the military with rank and just kind of this, hey, we're here to protect democracy, not practice it. So, rule number one, just, do as I say. And it's a short conversation, right? So, that's where the art comes in over the science and leadership of at least that space, culturally understanding how to navigate that. So it's certainly a challenge, but a longer conversation, I'll say, in that space specifically for today's purpose, and to try to join you in making this point on humility. What I wanted to do was I wanted to reflect back quickly on a time when I was an operations officer, SEAL team, and you're essentially the nerve center of the SEAL team. You've got the executive officer and the commanding officer above you, and everybody else is kind of running through you as operations. And you're, it's almost literally impossible to try to check all the boxes. But for whatever reason, that was my mindset. And it was not a good thing, because that's all I did, right? So upon the end of that tour, I had to reflect back and say, gosh, what would those people working for me say about my leadership? And if all they have to say is, well, Adam did this and Adam did that, or Commander Weiner did this and that, and they had nothing to share on what I did for them, then to the standard that I believe in good leadership, I fell way short. And, I'm pretty senior in my career at this point. And that was a natural, humbling experience, I'll say, to appreciate the truth in it. And it was unacceptable to me, but, it's part of the struggle. So what am I going to do more precisely at this point to improve upon that? Because I intend every day to be a great leader, but clearly I fell short of the mark in that when I was in that operations role, when I was moving up to be the executive officer of a SEAL team. So now it's just, the whole command and then the commanding officer, about 300 people at the command, half SEALs. And especially in the culture, in the military, the executive officer is kind of the individual that cracks the whip. So, I'll say people are probably not going out of their way to strike up a conversation with the executive officer, generally speaking. So, and this is the space precisely where I want to do better. And it's going to naturally be a challenge. So what I came up with is, as I said, it's just paramount that every week I start the week by peppering my calendar, not a ton, but I think, like 3 times a week, 30 minutes at a pop, that I would schedule time to sit down and just do what we called, anyone calls it a one-on-one, just, closed door, get to know you, and just one at a time. You can only do so much. You're talking to a whole room. Sometimes you're talking to nobody. So they would expect in a one-on-one with the XO that you're going to talk about work. But I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to. I really want to take time to get to know them and build rapport, and essentially kind of battle back a little bit of the paranoia of the vertical relationship, that there's a professional appreciation for, but as it relates to my ability to be a better leader, which is to say you have to get to know people. The way you get to know people is by building rapport. You have to first kind of tear down the stuffiness and relax and find some common ground, something to laugh at. So, it's easy. If you live in Michigan, you can talk about the weather, complain about the Lions or something like that, but that's just the stuff on the iceberg on the surface. So that's nice. You get credit for it. But you really want to get to know somebody, you have to have some courage to kind of dive deeper into those issues that are a little bit more personal. Not everyone's going to be comfortable talking about it, but that's okay. But I made an effort to do that, in short. And to kind of skip forward, it was fantastic. Because it wasn't just the people that I talked to, it was the people that I didn't talk to. Because what inevitably happens is people will run back and be like, wow, the executive officer just had a great conversation with me. He, blah, blah, blah. And they'll probably use this throwaway comment like, man, that guy really cares. And then, that starts to permeate. And that's what people want to know. Do you care? And the effect it can have is so profound, because where normally maybe I'm at an arm's length, I built a relationship with a young junior officer who had this crazy background where he was orphaned as a young child. He had to bounce around to these different foster homes. He never met his biological mother, and for one reason or another, his biological mother started to reach out to him, email him, call him on the phone. He was getting like voicemails. He didn't know how to handle it. And he actually came to me, and you could see it was bringing him a lot of pain. And he opened up to me about that. We had already developed a nice line of communication. And I have a bunch of resources as it relates to therapists and psychologists with all the issues that we have in special operations. So I had that Rolodex, if you will. And I was reaching for it. And when I thought, I don't think that's what this is. He just wants my opinion, just wants to talk. It's a safe space, if you will. He's looking for some perspective. And so I told him what I thought. I just gave him my opinion. And, which was, hey, man, you look to be in a lot of pain. I'm a young parent. I can imagine that your biological mother is also in pain. Maybe you hold the keys to unlock some pain, but think about it. And, I'm here, keep me posted. And 2 weeks later, he came by my office, he knocked on the door, and he said, hey, sir, I wanted to let you know, I spoke with my biological mother last night for like an hour. And he kind of stopped and said, thank you. And he left. And my point is, I came into the SEAL community for a lot of reasons. I wanted to make an impact, tip of the spear, and I did some pretty cool stuff tactically. But I remember that moment quite vividly thinking, wow, that might be the most significant thing that I've done, as far as having the opportunity to help in that way. So, and it all just started from having the humility to break down those vertical barriers and make an effort to get to know some people, again, without breaking the whole professional, in the military. So, and I want to say, and sorry if I'm going a little long on this, Rabbi, but I came across this definition of altruism. It says the right action produces the greatest benefit to others. And I want to say that the burden of leadership isn't so simple that it allows that unequivocally just all the time. Because your priority is the organization, is the entity. So others, an individual here and there, you're always in charge of the community in a leadership position. But that can be a threat as far as giving you too much focus on the entity and not taking the time to open up and build those relationships, because they can be so powerful. And so I always like to fall back to a quote that my friend tells me a lot, which is, it doesn't matter who you are. Yeah, you've got rank on your sleeve, but if you really want to make a difference in somebody's life, it's not that they don't care how much you know. they want to know how much you care. So, sometimes the simplest rules tend to be the most profound. Now, like you were bringing it up, Rabbi, there's humility before others, but then it's a totally different ballgame when we talk about humility before Hashem. Are you comfortable if I roll right into this? Because I know we're running short.
Yes, absolutely.
So as I mentioned, I'm a parent, a proud parent, we'll say, and like every parent out there, when your first child's born, it changes your life. And so I was a young lieutenant commander at the time. I was, struggling with kind of being around and being that family man, being that good husband and good father, but working at it, clearly struggling. And then you get to a point where you say, Adam, you're a man of action, and there's a lot of intent here, but at some point, I wonder if your cup runneth over. Meaning it wasn't the military's fault that I wasn't delivering as a good husband and a good father to the standard that I wanted to. It was mine. And sometimes there's a cost, there's a price. And I felt like the price for me might be I need more space, that nomadic, more stressful life in the military, it was time for me to move on, which, people say all the time, they're like, wait a second, you did 14 years? I thought you Naval Academy guys were supposed to be good at math, because the 20-year mark, active duty, you get this full pension. You could do 6 years on your head. But I always remind people, my daughter was 4, my son was 2 at the time. 6 more years meant that my daughter would have been 10, and I knew I couldn't get that time back. And that was more of a priority. And I like I said, I'm an action guy. So if I'm not doing it, I need to take action to deliver. And I think it's worth stating that at this point, it's not insignificant that I was introduced to my first Chabad house as it relates to finding more clarity in my priorities, the priority of God, of family, and then of country. And it was ironic to me that I knew my life experiences had presented that in reverse, that I always served my country. I wanted to, I did. And then I really, I started my family as in my mid-30s. And by my late 30s, I'm walking into this Chabad house for the first time. And finally, it had justified that painful integrity that I lived with, that, I thought it was about me. And it's pretty easy to have integrity when, nothing's hidden from Hashem. So I understood why that was easier for me at that point. And I just said, Adam, it's not about the pension. You don't have to have it all figured out. What you need to do is do something to put yourself in a better position to serve your priorities, that it's an opportunity every day to serve those priorities in or out of uniform. And I think there's a different space where you can do that better. Then you should do that. And so what I'm saying to you, Rabbi, what I'm saying to our audience tonight is that the humility before Hashem for me was appreciating that it didn't matter that I was giving up some golden pension or the opportunity to become a commanding officer, that it mattered. It did matter to me. That's my point. It mattered a lot to me, but it mattered more that I would position myself so I could serve Hashem better and serve my family better. And so just to kind of put a bow on it, 5 years now since I've gotten out, and I think it's a beautiful thing when you hear a story from somebody and it's that story that says, I think I got a little message from the big man upstairs that is telling me, okay, you're kind of pointed on the right path. Because I can't overstate what an honor it was that out of the blue earlier this year, this mensch of a man, Isaac Leiter, put together this amazing bar mitzvah for baby Moshe. For most who probably know, during the horrific terrorist attacks in 2008 in Mumbai, among the tragedies were Moshe's parents, the rabbi at a Chabad, and his wife, and that Moshe's keeper saved his life. And so it's an amazing story, and I was aware of it. I remember I was serving at the time. I was on my first platoon, and this unbelievable bar mitzvah, and because he did sea, air, and land, the guy said, "Oh yeah, I need a Navy SEAL to do tefillin with, a Jewish Navy SEAL." So I was like, Isaac called the broom closet of me and the few other guys that were in there, and I got to go to Newark, New Jersey, and there's Moshe Holtzberg putting tefillin on me. And again, my point is just that I didn't ask for that. It's an incredible honor, something that brings me a lot of joy, and it's just, I guess it's a little drop of that. Hey, that to me is my story where Hashem kind of came in and said, "Okay, keep going. Every day is an opportunity. Keep doing what you're doing." And with that, I know we've gone long, Rabbi. I want to kind of call it there.
Well, thank you, Adam. And that's a beautiful photo over there on the right. Little did you know that when you walked into that Chabad house in Coronado with Rabbi Eli Fradkin, that you'd be on the hook now for the rest of your life, because I happen to be a yeshiva classmate of his. So when you thought you were getting away from him, he just made a phone call, and wherever you go now, you are connected. And that picture at the end is beautiful with you putting on the tefillin. I know we've had the opportunity to do tefillin every lot, and I know you put a tefillin on your own. But the other difference from the earlier years is now you have a nice Hasidic beard. So that that's another addition to who you are. But what a beautiful way to conclude. And I think going back to where we started, it is a difficult time right now for the world. But all of the messages you shared, there's an underlying theme. And that is that the power is within you, that God gave us the power. Circumstances around us we may not be able to affect. We may not be able to change the world and the virus and whatever other issues are taking place around us. But we have this enormous reservoir of courage, of strength within us that God gave us. And we shouldn't underestimate the power of what we can achieve and the light that we can bring to the world. So thank you, Adam. I know, as I mentioned, that the motto of the Navy SEALs is the only easy day was yesterday.
Right.
That may be true, but in Judaism, we certainly believe that the brightest days are ahead of us. And God willing, we'll get through this, and we will experience the light through the darkness, experience the redemption and the goodness that will come. Thank you so much for the messages, and God bless you. God bless all of us.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.